A new study shows that over 1 billion young people are at risk of hearing loss. This is blamed on loud music in headphones and earbuds and noisy music venues. Phones, music, movies and shows. It's common for adolescents and young adults to listen to loud music for longer periods. Let's unpack this with Professor Wet Swanepoel, Professor of Audiology at the University of Pretoria. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, when one thinks back to their teenage years, the use of Walkmans and portable CD players was a constant among young people then. It seems no different now with young people constantly walking around with earplugs. What makes the findings of this study so alarming?
Yes, I think things have changed quite a bit, in the last 10 to 20 years with smartphones available, the fact that they have earphones connected to them. So these are personal listening devices, and you're absolutely right. We're seeing the youth use these devices for hours on end every day. And of course, we use them because they give us the music we love and they connect us to the people we love. But there is a risk, and this World Health Organization study has accumulated all the research evidence to date. And in this conclusion, they indicate that more than 1 billion youth between 12 and 35 years of age are at risk due to unsafe listening practices. So there's certainly an increase in terms of risk over the past decade compared to previous decades.
Now, Prof, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention limits safe noise levels at around 85 decibels. Now, in layman's terms, what would that entail? How does one know what is reasonable?
Yes, that's a very good question, Katleva. It's not always easy to know, and the World Health Organization has given guidelines in terms of, turning the volume down so that you're not listening at maximum volume when you're listening to your personal music devices. Also, when you're in, noisy environment, recreational centers, it's important also then to make sure that you take listening breaks, that you're not there all the time, because the noise levels typically exceed those risk levels at 85 dB. The risk of hearing loss due to sound or noise is a combination of the length or the duration of time you spend in these venues or with these headphones, and then also the intensity. So if you drop the volume down, you can spend longer time listening, but if you up the volume, you need to make those time periods shorter. And
what is a reasonable short time period for you to be in those loud spaces?
Yes, again, that's a difficult question because it depends how loud it is. So, for example, if you're in an environment where there's industrial noise, big drills in mines, without hearing protection, it's only safe to be in those very high levels of noise for 5 to 10 minutes a day. But if you're listening to your music on a smartphone at a comfortable level, you can typically listen for 6 hours a day. But if you're in a noisy environment where you're turning up that volume to maximum or to 75% of the levels, then you probably have to start dropping your time spent listening to about an hour or hour and a half.
So for people that work in environments where the noise levels would typically be up and they have to be in those spaces for quite long periods of time, what then can they do to prevent hearing loss in the near future?
Yes, that's very important. So we want to see how can we be preventative. So when you work in noisy environments, or even if you go to recreational places where there's very loud noise, it's very good to use earplugs so that you can just put them in your ears, dampen the noise, and then you can spend longer periods of time in those settings. Many industries, are regulated. So if you work in a noisy mining industry, for example, regulations prescribe employers to actually provide you with hearing protection.
Prof, the study also cautions against the use of earbuds. Just take us through the dangers thereof.
Yes, so the study is talking about unsafe listening practices using headphones, and they mention earplugs in particular. And the fact is, it's not necessarily that earplugs are more dangerous than over-the-ear headphones, but they oftentimes don't give as much attenuation or dampening of the background noise. So when you're in a public transport, for example, and you've got your earbuds on, to get rid of the noise in that environment, you usually turn up the volume so that you only listen to the music, and that's when that becomes risky because you're trying to block out background sound with your music, and that just means you're putting in a lot of sound energy into your ears.
And also the cleaning of the ears must also be a very important process, Prof. When one uses the buds to clean your ears, how safe is that to use?
Yes, there's a saying that the only thing you should use to clean your ears is your elbow. So it's not really something that we encourage people to do. Wax is a normal thing that should be in ears. It's actually protective, and it also helps us not to have itchy ears. But it can be that there's too much wax, and when there's too much wax, it's usually when you experience a little bit of hearing loss. And then you may want to go and see a nurse or a doctor for them to remove it. But earbuds oftentimes actually have the opposite effect, where you're pushing a lot of that wax back into the ear canal. So yes, of course, if there's a little bit of wax sitting on the outside of the ear canal, by all means, take that out. But you shouldn't put those earbuds deeply into the ear canal.
Sure. So lastly, Prof, November is recognized as Disability Month. The loss of hearing is one disability that you can't see. What are the signs that one should look out for that could be an indication of a pending hearing loss?
You're right, Katlego. Hearing loss is called a silent epidemic because, you don't know people have hearing loss. And oftentimes, even if you have a hearing loss yourself, you may not recognize that you have hearing problems. So typical places where you may notice that you are struggling to hear may be when you're in noisy restaurants and you're sitting in a group of people and you're having difficulty following the conversation. That oftentimes is an early sign that there may already be damage to some of the higher frequency regions in your hearing ability. Oftentimes the people closest to us notice the fact that we have hearing problems before we do. So, they may complain that you're turning up the volume of the TV too loudly. And those are all things that, should be red flags. And that should really encourage you to go and have a hearing test conducted to make sure you know what your hearing status is.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Prof. That's a very interesting conversation there. That was Professor of Audiology, Professor Wet Swanepoel at the University of Pretoria.